Warner Brothers executives told Clint Eastwood to use a standard police revolver for Dirty Harry. "The gun doesn't matter," they said. "Nobody cares what weapon you're holding." Clint disagreed. What happened next created one of the most iconic weapons in film history and proved the executives catastrophically wrong. It was March 1971. Clint Eastwood was preparing to play Harry Callahan, a San Francisco detective who operated outside the rules. The script was dark, violent, controversial. Warner Brothers was nervous about the whole project. Too brutal, too political, too risky. But they'd greenlit it because Clint's star power was undeniable. After the spaghetti westerns and his television success, he could open a film. The studio figured even if the movie was problematic, Clint would make it profitable. So they approved the budget. Hired director Don Siegel, started pre-production. Then came the production meeting about weapons. The studio's prop master presented the standard options. A Smith & Wesson .38 Special. The gun actual San Francisco police carried, reliable, familiar, safe. "This is what SFPD uses," the prop master explained. "It's authentic. Audiences will recognize it as a real cop gun." The executives nodded approvingly. Authenticity was important. The film was already controversial enough. Making the cop's gun realistic would ground it in reality. Make it feel like a legitimate police procedural rather than a vigilante fantasy. Clint sat quietly through the presentation. He'd read the script multiple times, knew every scene, every line, every moment. And he knew something the executives didn't understand. Harry Callahan wasn't a standard cop. The gun couldn't be standard either. "What about a .44 Magnum?" Clint asked. The room went quiet. The prop master looked confused. The executives exchanged glances. A .44 Magnum? That wasn't a police weapon. That was a hand cannon. Massive, impractical, ridiculously overpowered for police work. "A .44 Magnum isn't standard issue," one executive said carefully, as if explaining something obvious to someone who didn't understand police procedures. "No department uses it. It's too powerful, too big. Cops carry .38 Specials or occasionally .357 Magnums. A .44 would be unrealistic." "Harry Callahan isn't realistic," Clint replied. "He's extreme. Everything about him is excessive. The gun should reflect that." The executive wasn't convinced. "Clint, nobody in the audience will care what gun you're holding. They'll be watching you, not the weapon. The .38 is fine. It's authentic. Let's move on." But Clint didn't move on. The gun matters. Harry needs something that makes a statement before he even fires it. Something that says this cop is different, dangerous. The .44 Magnum does that. The .38 doesn't. Another executive jumped in, his tone more dismissive now. "This is about ego, isn't it? You want the biggest gun because it looks cool. But filmmaking isn't about looking cool. It's about storytelling. And the story doesn't require an oversized revolver." Clint's jaw tightened slightly. That same controlled reaction he'd show in 100 films when someone had just made a mistake but didn't know it yet. "It's not about looking cool," he said quietly. "It's about character. Harry carries the most powerful handgun in the world because he hunts the most dangerous criminals. The gun is a statement. Without it, he's just another cop." The executives weren't buying it. Too expensive, too impractical, too much of a deviation from the approved plan. They'd done focus groups. Test audiences didn't care about weapon details. They cared about the actor, the story, the action. The gun was a prop, a detail, interchangeable. "We're using the .38, the lead executive said, his tone suggesting the conversation was over. "It's department standard. It's realistic. It's what we're going with. This isn't negotiable." Clint stood up, slowly, that deliberate movement that carried weight. "Then find another actor," he said simply, "because I'm not playing Harry Callahan with the wrong gun." The executive stared at him. Was he serious? Was Clint Eastwood actually threatening to walk away from a major Warner Brothers production over a prop? Over what type of revolver his character carried? "Clint, be reasonable," one executive started. "We've already invested." "The gun is wrong," Clint interrupted. "And if you don't understand why it's wrong, you don't understand the character. I'm not doing this movie with a .38. Harry Callahan carries a .44 Magnum. That's not negotiable." The room erupted in frustrated arguing. This was absurd. Actors didn't get to dictate prop choices. This was a production decision. Clint was being difficult, unreasonable, letting his ego interfere with practical filmmaking. But Clint had leverage. The film was built around him. They couldn't replace him at this stage without scrapping the entire project. And despite their frustration, the executives knew Clint wasn't being randomly difficult. He'd been right about his instincts before. The quiet intensity in the westerns, the minimalist acting style, things they'd questioned that had worked. Finally, the lead executive sighed. "Fine, we'll allow the .44 Magnum. But if test audiences hate it, if it feels ridiculous, we're reshooting with the .38. Understood?" Clint nodded. Understood. Production moved forward. The prop department acquired a Smith & Wesson Model 2944 Magnum revolver. 8 3/8-inch barrel. Massive, intimidating. When the prop master first handed it to Clint, even he looked uncertain. "This thing is huge," he said. "You sure about this?" Clint held the weapon, felt its weight, its presence. "This is right," he said. The studio executives remained skeptical. During early filming, they'd visit the set and watch Clint with the oversized revolver. It looked comical to them, too big for his hand, too theatrical. They were certain test audiences would laugh. This was going to be a problem they'd have to fix in reshoots. Then came the scene, the iconic scene, the one that would define not just the movie, but action cinema for decades. Harry Callahan confronting a bank robber, the criminal on the ground, wounded, his gun just out of reach. Harry standing over him, .44. Magnum pointed directly at him. And then the line, "I know what you're thinking. Did he fire 6 shots or only 5? Well, to tell you the truth, in all this excitement, I've kind of lost track myself. But being this is a .44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and would blow your head clean off, you've got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do ya, punk?" Don Siegel, the director, called cut. The crew was silent. Something had just happened, something unexpected. The scene wasn't just good, it was electric. And the gun wasn't incidental, it was essential. The entire speech was built around the weapon. The .44 Magnum wasn't a prop, it was a character element. When the studio executives saw the dailies, their skepticism began to crack. The scene worked, more than worked. It was potentially the centerpiece of the entire film, and the gun was integral to it. You couldn't swap in a .38 special. The line, "the most powerful handgun in the world," wouldn't land. The threat wouldn't feel real. The gun made the scene, but they still weren't sure how audiences would react. The film finished shooting in July 1971. Warner Brothers scheduled test screenings for October. The executives remained nervous. The film was violent, controversial, dark, and that gun still looked absurdly large. The first test screening was in Pasadena, California. General audience, no film students or cinema enthusiasts, just regular people seeing a new cop movie. The studio executive sat in the back, watching nervously. The film played. Violent, intense, morally ambiguous. The audience was engaged but not overwhelmed. Then came the scene, Harry confronting the bank robber. The .44 Magnum pointed down. The speech beginning. Did he fire 6 shots or only 5? The theater went completely silent, every person leaning forward. But being this is a .44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world. Absolute focus. You could feel the tension building. Do I feel lucky? Well, do ya, punk? The theater erupted, not just applause, cheering, people shouting at the screen. The executives looked at each other in shock. This wasn't normal test screening reaction. This was something else entirely. After the screening, the comment cards came back. Question: what was your favorite moment? Over 70% mentioned the .44 Magnum scene. Not just the scene. The gun specifically. People wrote things like, "That huge gun was incredible," and "The .44 Magnum speech was the best part," and "I want to know what kind of gun that was." The studio executives were stunned. Clint had been right. The gun wasn't just a prop. It was iconic. Audiences didn't just notice it, they loved it. The weapon had become inseparable from the character. Dirty Harry was released December 23, 1971. The reviews were mixed. Critics called it fascist, reactionary, problematic. But audiences didn't care about the politics. They came in massive numbers. The film was a phenomenon, and everywhere people talked about the movie, they talked about the .44 Magnum. Gun stores reported a surge in demand for Smith & Wesson Model 29 revolvers. The weapon became a cultural touchstone. Smith & Wesson couldn't manufacture them fast enough. The gun Clint had fought for had become one of the most recognizable weapons in cinema history. The executives who'd dismissed the gun as unimportant quietly stopped mentioning their original position. At a studio meeting months after the film's release, one executive tried to take credit. The .44 Magnum was a brilliant choice, he said, as if he'd supported it all along. Clint was in that meeting. He didn't contradict the executive publicly, just gave him a look. That Dirty Harry look, cold, knowing. The look that said, "I know what you said, and you know I know." Later, privately, the lead executive who'd fought hardest against the .44 Magnum approached Clint. "You were right about the gun," he admitted. "I didn't see it. I should have trusted your instincts." Clint's response was characteristically brief. The gun wasn't a detail, it was the character. If you don't understand your character's weapon, you don't understand your character. Dirty Harry spawned 4 sequels. Every single one featured the .44 Magnum prominently. The weapon became so associated with Clint that other films referenced it, parodies used it. The gun transcended the movie and became a cultural icon. Smith & Wesson later estimated that Dirty Harry increased their Model 29 sales by over 300%. The gun had been a niche product before the film. After, it was one of their best sellers. They sent Clint a commemorative revolver with a plaque thanking him for making their weapon famous. The executives who'd insisted nobody cares about the gun learned an expensive lesson about listening to actors who understood their characters. Clint had been willing to walk away from a major film over a prop choice, not because of ego, because he understood something they didn't. Character isn't just dialogue and performance, it's everything, including the weapon. In film schools today, Dirty Harry is taught as an example of how a single prop choice can define a character. The .44 Magnum isn't analyzed as a weapon, it's analyzed as a character element, an extension of Harry Callahan's personality, his excessive nature, his willingness to use overwhelming force, his rejection of standard procedures, all because Clint refused to use the wrong gun, and because he understood that sometimes the smallest details create the biggest impact. The .44 Magnum speech has been parodied, referenced, and quoted countless times. "Do you feel lucky, punk?" became one of the most famous lines in cinema history, and none of it works without that massive revolver. Try delivering that line while holding a standard .38 Special. It doesn't land. The threat doesn't feel real. The gun makes the line. Warner Brothers never questioned Clint's prop choices again. When he insisted on specific weapons, specific vehicles, specific costume elements, they listened, because they'd learned that Clint's attention to detail wasn't about ego or control. It was about understanding character at a level most people missed. The executive who'd said, "The gun doesn't matter, nobody will care what weapon you're holding," retired from Warner Brothers in 1985. In his final interview with the trade papers, he was asked about his biggest mistake. He mentioned several films that underperformed, several projects that fell apart. Then, almost as an afterthought, he said, "And I told Clint Eastwood the gun didn't matter in Dirty Harry. That was probably the dumbest thing I ever said in this business, because it turned out the gun mattered more than anyone could have imagined. It became one of the most iconic weapons in film history. It launched a sales phenomenon. It defined a character. It created a cultural moment. All because one actor understood his character well enough to fight for a prop, and refused to compromise on what he knew was right."